Raqs and IFA go back a really long time. We were, I think, the second grantees of the IFA, which was a long time ago. And our proposal was to look at the history and the making of the cinematic image, but not in sort of textual terms, but the cinematographic terms. So how it's lit, how it's imagined, when you stop lighting, for example. And it was great. We did it with C.K. Muralidharan, and it was one of the. I think for us it was a very important few years that we spent researching, and I think it's been very good for our practice, spending enough time thinking about the image in all sorts of ways. And then we've been grantee number 350 something, so which we took on to support projects with other people. So for us, the idea of taking on grants from the IFA is as much about sort of reading and understanding certain parts and aspects of how contemporary Indian, or not, that's not the right term, but how one sees the landscape of the contemporary, whether it's in cinematic terms or in terms of possibilities. That is what the last grant is about.
I think the relationship with IFA, once it begins, is never a one-way street. So, and what's interesting for us is also being a part of a larger community of IFA grantees and being a part of that network, but also giving back as being evaluators, as being people who have both a formal as also an informal relationship of conversation with all the people who are working at IFA, people who are program staff, and also thinking about the future of the organization. It's also very interesting to see new projects come in when we get asked to be evaluators, because then it's an opportunity I think for artists through IFA to also shape the character and the texture of grant giving, which is very nice.
It is always an interesting question that in culture we come up always this question, why did art needs the support? And it is something, I can tell you a story of a man who brought a lot of young British artists in late 80s and early 90s, and he never kept it in his home. He always would give as gift to his friends or people he would meet to keep it in their houses, and he would say that enjoy it for 1 month, you will see the world differently, or you will think the world differently. Question of always this impulse around you that makes another possible way of thinking alive. It is a very simple act. It is not a very complicated act of creating huge infrastructures and creating huge pillars. It's basically a gesture towards making another person available to you on a different level of conversation.
Also, more concretely, we have to recognize that in India there is very little institutional support for the arts. The state support for the arts is non-existent, virtually non-existent, which means that if as a society we have to consider the many expressions that exist amongst us and value them and value the work of what artists do, then the responsibility for doing that actually falls on individuals and on all sorts of corporate bodies who have the power and who have the resources to be able to. Otherwise, the arts will suffocate here. And it's what Jivesh was also saying. It can be a simple gesture. You can be a corporate donor and contribute to the endowment fund that will sustain IFA over the long term, which is absolutely necessary and important. But you can also be an individual friend of IFA and contribute small sums of money or your time through the year, and that makes an enormous amount of difference. For example, I am a friend of the IFA. I give 5,000 rupees a year, which is a small sum. But if lots of people did that, then it would also make for a more democratic culture of how the arts are supported, and that's necessary.